Good evening, everyone. We're really happy you can join us. We have Dr. Kevin Colleary with us tonight, and he is from the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the Graduate School of Education at Fordham University in New York. And he will be sharing ideas about critical thinking and practical ideas about how you can use it in our English language classrooms. If you have some questions, please put them either in the Q&A box, or that's the best place for them, and we'll try and get them as we go along, if that's appropriate, or at the end, if that's more appropriate. Please make sure as well to address your chat box to all panelists and attendees. That way everybody can see what you're posting and not just me. Although I love that, it's great if everybody can kind of see what's going on. I think that's it. We're really happy you can be with us tonight. And Kevin, take it away.
Okay, Trisha, thank you very much. So good evening, everybody, or whatever time it is where you are. My name is Kevin Colleary, and I'm going to talk this evening about critical thinking skills generally, but then more specifically about how they fit in our efforts at English language instruction. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about me, and that basically I'm not really a TESOL or English language instruction guy. I'm more of a content guy in that my work and my teaching, etc., is pretty much revolved around content, especially in what we call in the US social studies, and about content area reading. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today kind of comes out of that world, but I think it's incredibly important and very instructive for the work that you do as English language instructors and the work that I've done a little bit over these past few years here in Bangkok with the Regional English Language Office at the US Embassy. So I first, however, want to share with you, or ask you rather, a little bit about you. So one question, can you tell us in the chat box, I guess Trisha's going to load the poll. Is that what you say, Trisha?
Yes,
but if you could just
launched
say,
it.
where do you teach? So are you in the pre-service program somewhere, or do you teach at one of the other levels, primary, secondary, or tertiary university level?
Okay, we're going to give it a few minutes. People are still voting, but it looks like far and away right now we have the university level people with us. Give it a few more seconds to see if people will.
So Trisha, when you say university, that means that's folks who are teaching teachers or folks who are teaching university level students English. Which does that mean, do you think?
I would say it could be one of two things. It could either mean people, well, I guess if it's pre-service, they would have said that, but probably teaching university level students.
Right, so university level students who are learning English.
Yes. Or they are teaching teachers how to teach.
Right.
You know,
right.
So they're.
So it could be a mix of both of those.
Yes, I would say
Okay.
that's true. Okay, we have almost everybody voting. It's a lot more. I'm going to end the poll in 10 seconds, less than that probably. And there are some people that teach all categories that have done pre-service, primary level, secondary level, and have taught university. I'm seeing that in the chat box. So.
Okay.
I'm going to end the poll now so that you can have a good idea. I'll share it with everybody so we can see, and that will just give everybody a chance to see what our results were.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. That's terrific. That certainly helps me know a little bit more about who I'm speaking to. Although I have to say, kind of the general principles and the general guidelines that I'm going to speak about tonight really are applicable no matter the level. But of course, it's up to as with all of us in our teaching, it's up to the individual teacher to make the ideas meet the goals of your own level as much as possible. So our webinar goals tonight there's three of them. We're going to examine first what critical thinking means, then look specifically at critical thinking in English language learning, and then finally, examine some strategies that support critical thinking in both vocabulary and comprehension instruction specifically. So these are just some, they're things that you may well be doing already, but they're strategies that I like because they specifically kind of pump up the volume, if you will, or get the kind of thinking going that we like to see in students as we build their capacity for critical thinking. So the first thing I want to talk about is, and some of you may be familiar with this, the idea of the 21st century skills. Sometimes in the US, these are called the 4 C's. And the 21st century skills that a lot of work has been done in schools of education in the US and in large districts and universities in the US around questioning what is it that we're teaching in this 21st century, or how is our teaching manifesting itself and hopefully getting better as the century moves on. So the 4 21st century skills are critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, and communication. And the goal here, and the research is kind of starting to show that students who are better able to do these 4 things are going to be more capable or more ready for some of the challenges that await them in the future. You know, one of the little data points I like to talk about is there was a study at the World Economic Forum in 2016 that said that 65% of our current kindergartners, or those who are in primary school before they even start class 1, 65% of those students will work at jobs that don't even exist yet. And that for me is really a powerful little statistic, because it challenges this whole idea of us as teachers supposedly having all the answers, or teaching students what they need to survive in the future around specific content or specific skills. A lot of what our students are going to be dealing with as they move forward, we don't even know about yet in the fields of artificial intelligence and robotics, et cetera, et cetera. But these 4 skills, we believe, if they're able to think critically, think creatively, to collaborate, and to communicate, they're going to succeed and they're going to do well. So that's all I'm going to say right now about 21st century skills, because I want to just focus in on one of these, and that's the idea of critical thinking. So when we think about what critical thinking is, these are some of the descriptors, or some of the words that we like to imagine a good, solid critical thinker is focused, thinks in a linear fashion, is intentional, is logical, is systemic in the way they think. And this is the type of thinking that we want to develop more and more in our students. And I'm basically arguing tonight that we can do that while still being successful English language instructors and helping them grow their capacity in the English language. We can also help them grow their capacity as critical thinkers. So Paul and Elder laid out a bit of a schema, a 5-point schema to answer the question, what does a critical thinker do? And I want to go over these 5 points just so that we're all kind of on the same page as far as our understanding of what critical thinking is. So the first point is really one of the most important, and that's the idea of questioning. That students who are critical thinkers, or people who are critical thinkers, are able to raise questions, are able to look at problems and formulate them or present them clearly and precisely. So this idea of raising questions and understanding problems is the first of the 5 elements, according to Paul and Elder, that a critical thinker does. The second is that they use data. They are able to find evidence and data to support the answers and the solutions that they come up with. So while one's kind of personal knowledge or emotions are always important in communication, they can't be the only thing that gets us to an answer or to a solution for a problem. That a critical thinker needs to gather and assess and use data and evidence effectively. This is very, very important in in today's world where there's more data, there's more information than ever. We have to help our students understand how they can use that. And a critical thinker knows that data is an important element in the process. The third answer to what a critical thinker does is that he or she comes to well-reasoned conclusions and solutions so that you're able to come up with some answers or solutions to the questions and the problems that are posed, and that you can test them against relative criteria and standards, so that there's this idea of coming up with some conclusions and solutions. The fourth element is that a critical thinker is open-minded. And this is so very important. This is, this kind of stuff becomes very difficult to teach. And we don't, in some ways, we never really teach it, but we can model it. I'm going to talk a little bit later about modeling. But in our own teaching, we first, as the teacher, have to be open-minded and understand that we don't have all the answers. Understand that maybe a new way of looking or a new way of thinking of something can help us come to a solution. So the idea of a critical thinker being open-minded is critically important. And finally, the fifth element is that they communicate effectively with others in figuring out and discussing these solutions or these answers to the questions or the problems that are posed. So I'm gonna quickly go through these. I've kind of distilled them down a little bit in the next few slides because Paul and Elder had a lot of words in each one. But if we could think of these five in a very simple format, I think it would be helpful. So the first, a critical thinker raises questions and problems. Second, they gather and assess relevant information or data or evidence. And then before we go to the third, I just want to ask you to think as we move forward on this, and I'll come back to this question. Why do you think, or do you have any ideas about why you think any of this matters? So the third is they come to well-reasoned conclusions. The fourth is that they're open-minded. And then the fifth, again, is that they can communicate. So let me ask you, let's go back to that question I put there in the middle. Can somebody offer, and Trisha, I'm going to ask you to come back and manage this. Why do you think, what are some reasons or what are some ideas you might have about why any of this matters?
Well, I will say my opinion as we're waiting for people to write, because sometimes we have people that have great thoughts, but they're a little bit shy to put their answer on the chat box. But please feel free to put your answer on the chat box. We would love to hear from you. So why do I think any of this matters? I think that really what you said at the beginning about the 21st century skills really resonated with me about why this matters, is that it's a way that we're teaching students to think so that it doesn't matter what situation they're in, they can use this ability to think to make things better, to fit into a job that maybe they had never thought of or heard of before, that they can really be much more adaptable with the thinking skills because at the core of it is what's there. Okay, we do have one response here that I will read, unless you wanted to comment on what I said.
No, you're right. I mean, that's for me, what you said kind of, I mean, I guess my first thought is, oh, thank God somebody's listening. No, I mean, this is really one of the important points I was trying to make. So
one of the others said, based on what you said at the beginning, how jobs in the future are still unknown. And these type of soft skills, and I think that that's an interesting word that Molly said, is soft skills. Skills that, aren't, can move with you from wherever you are. And it helps people to be more flexible and helps them to be more successful in the future.
Yeah, I also have to say, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I come out of a content background, but this work, and I've been doing this work for the last couple of years, kind of focusing on this is really content free. It's content everything and content free, because I've given these kind of talks to math teachers, to science teachers, to English language teachers, to history teachers. It doesn't really matter the kind of content that you're focused on, but helps always to present and to challenge that content in a way that keeps these critical thinking skills moving.
Excellent. Yes,
Okay?
I really do love how you said that it's everything about content, but it's so adaptable to it speaks to what the skills are themselves, being flexible, and able to adapt.
And honestly, back to whoever talked about flexibility and soft skills, it also creates, I believe, it creates a better person, a better citizen, a better mother and father and, council person or mayor of a village or headman in a village, whatever. That all these skills, this approach to the world is beneficial for our students. And it also, I think, can give certain kids a capacity to shine. Kids who may not necessarily remember all the formulas in math, or their spelling as they're learning English might be really bad, but they have a mind that allows a way to analyze and a way to solve problems. When critical thinking is integrated into the larger curriculum and as a way of teaching, that kid has an opportunity to really blossom. And that is, as we all know as teachers, that can be one of the most powerful experiences for a kid's success. Okay?
Excellent. We don't have any other comments here.
Okay. So let's move on. So for those of you, which is all of us, who've been through your bachelor's degree or been to college, you'll realize that this idea or this focus on critical thinking is not new. What's on the screen now is a colorful but a kind of concise version of Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom was an American professor in the middle of the 20th century. And in the 1950s, his work became more and more well-known, and certainly years later when I was in college, I'm sure all of you learned this or were this was shared with you at some point in your undergraduate education. So this idea of starting and teaching and learning so that students can start with recall and remembering, but that's not where we need to end, that we want to get them up that pyramid to the actual analyzing, evaluating, and creating stages so that they are actually learning in order to create something new or original, in order to justify their arguments, draw connections among ideas, etc. So, and believe me, I know there are days when, I would have given all the money I had to just get on that purple bar. Oh, if only they could remember what I tell them. But we can't really end there. And it's okay to have a day or two like that, of course, a week or two maybe. But we want overall to keep moving up that pyramid. And for our own benefit as teachers, but certainly so that our students become this more well-rounded, more thoughtful, and truly understand what that critical thinking means. So, but we also have to remember that critical thinking is not a natural state. Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a former Supreme Court justice in the United States, you may or may not know of her, but she was actually the first female Supreme Court justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor said that democracy is, no child is born knowing about democracy, that democracy must be taught over and over and over with each generation because it's not a natural state of being. It's the same way for critical thinking. It's not natural to us or to most of us. It's a deliberately developed complex set of skills which take years to acquire. So, you have to, this is nothing that anybody's going to do one day in class and think, okay, check, critical thinking is done. This really has to be understood by the teacher and, very importantly, by the administration and the community, et cetera, who are supposedly trying to support the teachers, but as a way of teaching and learning that is going to really help our students. So Vidona and Jabasso said that similarly, foreign language acquisition needs years of persistent training. right? You all know, as well as I do, nobody walks in one day and teaches a kid English. It just doesn't happen. It's only after years and years of study for all of us, no matter what the foreign language is, it's years and years of studying to be more proficient, to be more practiced, to be better at the foreign language. So these two things, I'm just going to go to that other slide. Critical thinking takes years to acquire and really practiced, as does foreign language. So for me, practicing both simultaneously provides a synergy effect. You develop the former and we improve the latter, and vice versa. So I believe this, as I said earlier, for every content, but for foreign language acquisition, I really do believe it has great benefit, because both of those tasks, building critical thinking skills and building foreign language capacity, take time. And so utilizing them at the same time really does, I believe, give us this synergy effect with our students. Okay, so I believe that this needs to be apparent and needs to be seen in everything we do. So it needs to be in our teacher talk, and this maybe is, forgive me if I'm a little too US focused sometimes, but teacher talk is what referred to as what I'm doing now, what we all do when we walk into the classroom, how we as teacher or professor or agent present ourselves, how we communicate with our students. So in other words, you're not going to do such a great job with critical thinking if you yourself as the teacher aren't thinking critically as you walk through your lessons, if you aren't asking questions, if you aren't challenging students to get to those higher levels. So we have to think about our own teacher talk. And it's funny, I say this, in this format with an online webinar, I'm like doing all the wrong things, because all I'm doing is talking at you rather than asking. But in this format, it's a little impossible. But in a classroom setting, I think we can all hopefully work at that idea of building that capacity with our students through the questioning, through the strategies, etc. Oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. It needs to be seen in the exercises and the activities that we do. And I'm going to give you some examples at the end of this evening. It needs to be in our objectives. And this is where I go back to the point I made earlier about your administration, whether it's a school principal or a dean or whomever, and the larger school community needs to support this idea that critical thinking is a worthwhile effort and is something that's going to make a difference. And it needs to be in our lesson planning, which kind of go back to the exercises and activities, so that we need to keep thinking about it as we work in every element of our own teaching and of our developing the schema that we share with our students. And again, all this can fit really into any content that you're talking about. So no matter the content you're teaching, the presentation, the exercises, the objectives, the plan, the teacher talk need to support or need to be wrapped up in, if you will, this idea of critical thinking as a beneficial goal. So let's look now at some very simple strategies. So the first one I'm going to talk about is useful when you're teaching vocabulary. You're trying to build students' vocabulary. So this is a strategy that asks students to use topical words to solve puzzles or answer questions. Now, we are all raised, because most of us were taught, in a way that says, oh, if ever any question that's asked, we have to get the right answer, right? What's the right answer? I mean, how many kids have begged you for the right answer? Just tell me the answer and I'll write it down. These strategies are fighting against that, because as you'll see in a few minutes, these strategies don't necessarily have right answers. I mean, there's some thinking and some facts that are involved in these, but that the answers in these particular strategies I'm going to talk about aren't really the point. And so we'll see what I'm saying in a minute. So here's an example of some teacher talk. Let's use the transportation words we've been learning about to answer some questions and have some fun. So you're working with pairs, or you're working with small groups, or you can do it with large group, whatever methodology around communication and group work works best in your setting. I have no answers about which is better than the other for this. This can work in any setting. But imagine this strategy, how you'd best use it in your own classroom. So the puzzle or the question or the challenge is, put the following transportation words in order. You're thinking in order of what? A, fastest to slowest. B, cheapest to most expensive. And C, in order of physical exertion. Now you'll see my list in a minute. And again, these aren't necessarily, these aren't the only ways to do this. These are Kevin's ideas around adapting some other strategies out there to present an exercise working with vocabulary words that continues to keep kids' critical thinking going. So here's my list of transportation words, right? These are words that I've taught to my class, that we've had in the textbook or the online program or whatever we're looking. We've seen these words, we've gone over the meaning of these words, and now we want to do a little something more with them. So think about this list, and then think about these three, right? So let's just, Trisha, can you come back with me here for a minute?
Yes, I was just doing that.
Okay, so let's just take a minute, you and I, to play, okay?
Excellent.
So fastest to slowest, right? Okay, so what do you think?
Oh, fastest to slowest. Fastest rocket is what I would say.
Okay.
Rocket.
And then?
Airplane.
All right. And do you know, Trisha, do you know that a rocket is faster than an airplane?
I don't know. I'm just guessing because of where it goes. It goes up in... So it
goes up in space versus the airplane that only goes to 35,000 feet, right?
Yes. And see, now is where it gets a little bit trickier because I'm thinking subway train. And then I'm saying to myself, maybe hot air balloons because they're kind of like airplanes. Maybe they're faster than I think. So I have to kind of, as I'm thinking about this, I have to say to myself, and then, I don't know. And then I say cruise ships because, going over, but cruise ships take months to get around places. So probably not that.
Yeah. And you know what?
I would say hot air balloons, subway trains, cruise ship.
You just reminded me of something that moving forward, I need to take cruise ship out of this exercise.
I think right now that's probably true, given the current state of affairs.
I just realized that right now. My God, I got a cruise ship in there. We don't want to talk about cruise ships these days.
We don't. We do not.
Now let's take one more minute and go on the other end. What are the slowest ones?
Oh, and someone just pointed some out. Bicycle or train. Are we talking about Bangkok traffic? So maybe a bus would be much slower than say a bicycle because I know that I have
traffic situation.
Yeah, I have walked faster than cars in Bangkok. And I've just gotten out of the taxi and said, I'll walk. And I've watched them stay in traffic as I get to my destination, faster. So that's it. See, and that's excellent. Yeah, that's a way to think about it is or a taxi is another thing, and buses. Generally, I would say taxis are faster than buses because taxis have one stop, whereas a bus typically has many. As you're thinking, trying to go through what the aspects, different ideas of these are.
Okay, so look now. Is there any magic list somewhere in the UN of fastest to slowest transportation words around the world? No, of course not. Because there can't be, first of all, because of all these parameters that somebody mentioned that you and I discussed. The point of the exercise is not necessarily to come up with some kind of right answers. The point of the exercise is, first of all, to get students speaking about the topic, and most importantly, to get them thinking about the topic. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's exactly how I think about critical thinking. And as I'm doing this exercise, I can feel my brain thinking, okay, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And so it's a really good way to stretch the way you think about things, as you were saying, because of the parameters.
Exactly. So here's some more examples, right? We did transportation words, but let's say we do sports words. and the challenge is indoor sports, outdoor sports, both sports. And again, what if ping pong table is on your list? Where, you can play it wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
But, et cetera, et cetera. Amount of equipment needed, least to most amount of equipment. Something like inventions, a timeline of inventions. Now that would take some research on the part of the students, but it would be an interesting kind of driver for talking about certain inventions, or the importance to humans. That is something that, of course, would be filled with analysis and evaluation about, well, is the pacemaker more important than penicillin, for example, just as an example. And then you could even do something, much more basic to grammar, like adjectives. If you're learning adjectives, well, which are the positive, the negative, and the neutral, which refer to people, to things, to both. These are all simple strategies that get students speaking, get students thinking, and get students using the words, the vocabulary words that you are trying to teach them. So let me just ask you now, Trisha and I mentioned this a little bit in our discussion, but anybody else have any ideas about how you think this uses critical thinking to support EL instruction? Or if you don't, and you think, oh my God, that guy is really off base, we can certainly talk about that too. So Trisha, if you'll come back and be my magic translator, please.
I'd be happy to. We'll see what people, like I said, people have a tendency, I see that they're all here, but they have a tendency to not want to speak up on the chat, which is just fine. That's just how it works.
I just want to give people an opportunity if they have.
Yes, that's fantastic. So one thing that's interesting to me is I love the idea that you're talking about using the activity to teach these things. Like I think grammar, for example, grammar and adjective, it can be one of the most boring things to study and to think about. But if you're adding this critical thinking component to it, one thing that it does do is I think that it helps make it a little bit more interesting, because it's not just this memorizing a long list of things, but it's also trying to engage with them and make it more nuanced, if I can use that word, and so that it's more interesting and more engaging, like I said. Let's say Molly had a great point. She's a great contributor. We appreciate everything she has to say, is that it's a symbiotic relationship. You can teach English language to support critical thinking, or use critical thinking to support English language. And I love that idea that she said, that it's symbiotic, that you can use, that it can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And that's really the goal. One of the things I always say to teachers is sometimes you get very normal pushback from people like, oh my God, I can't do one more thing. If you're going to give me one more thing, I will go right now and, jump off a cliff or something. It's too much for teachers, right? They're at the end. I well know it. I know it myself from my own teaching. So to Molly's point, hopefully this is not some new other thing that has to be done, but it's a shift in the way we're doing what we already do in order to promote this kind of thinking. Okay.
Excellent.
How about I move on?
That sounds fantastic.
So now we're going to look at a couple of strategies around comprehension, right? So the first ideas were about vocabulary, and now we'll look at when we're trying to students practice the comprehension of the English language that they read or see or listen to. So ideally, lesson plans and teacher talk around comprehension should focus on activities that allow for student perspective and point of view. This is a hugely important piece of understanding what it means to be a critical thinker, is giving students that air, that time, that space to actually connect with whatever text they're reading in a way that allows for their own perspective and their own point of view to come through. This is, of course, this can be especially important in this region of the world. There's a lot of cultural rules and regulations and understandings and systems that exist, and the relationship between teacher and student. We all know that. So helping to give students the freedom, if you will, to express their point of view, to ask the questions. This is a critically important element of building critical thinking. And Trisha, you came back, so I assume you have something to say.
I did. I came back because I do have something to say about this. I would just like to mention at this point, I talked to Kevin about this earlier, but when I was at Thai TESOL, just speaking about Thailand, it was interesting to me because there was a teacher that gave a presentation on doing a critical thinking project with the UN. Golly, I can't remember.
The sustainability goals.
The sustainability goals. Thank you, Kevin. And it was really just a beautiful project that he really engaged the students, and they learned so much. And one thing I loved about it as well was that when he was giving this presentation, it was so full. It was packed. So I think that you're right, that in this part of, in Thailand, that it is something that people want to do and that they are excited about, and that is happening as well. And so as we take from what you're saying and adapt it, I think that, and while there are challenges, I was really impressed to see how this teacher was able to make it work with something that's important, the UN sustainability goals, and get the students engaged and have them think about problems, real problems.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I mean, I have a friend who's a teacher educator here at John Shai, and he always talks to me about the continual effort in the teacher education for the larger, you know, for public school teachers, that they are working on this. But it's a challenge everywhere, for sure. But sometimes it can be to give kids that freedom and that space. Basically, that's what I'm trying to get at. So the freedom and the space includes their capacity to do these things. And these things all kind of fit in Bloom's taxonomy. So they should, to build that critical thinking idea, they should be solving problems. They should be making inference, transferring, judging, combining information into new patterns. These are the regular processes that students should be afforded the chance to do as they read, or as they listen, or as they learn new English language and understand and try to comprehend new text. These are part of what should be happening as they do this work. And this is not easy. I mean, I'm not, up here saying, yeah, this is easy to help a kid make inferences. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, any of us will ever do. But our commitment to it and our space for it is one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind in order to help build critical thinkers. And a way to do it is to go back to that first point that I talked about at the beginning, when we looked at Paul and Elder's What Does a Critical Thinker Do? And that's the idea of questions. Questions can be some of our best pals and tools as a teacher, but the kind of questions that we build on is so very, very important. So here's a list of some questions that, as students comprehend, as they are reading or listening or being read to, whatever, that these kind of questions need to be on a consistent basis in the air, in the conversation, in the classroom, so that they can not only comprehend and engage with the text, but that they can use that text to build on those other skills of transfer and making inferences and judgments, etc. So the idea of questioning is so important. And as a teacher, we want to model that so that students begin to feel the freedom to ask and the knowledge of how to ask those questions. And one of the most important questions, of course, that we can ever afford and allow and promote in our classroom is this one. And I know I love this slide because, I don't know, people love cats. I'm not such a cat guy, but I kind of love it. But it's this question of why. So that when students are given a text, when they're given a topic of study, etc., even though you're building their English language instruction, their English language capacity rather, they need to be free and to be promoted, if you will, to keep asking why this matters, why is this important, what is the connection to my particular life. And as I said before, this is not easy work at all. It's actually quite hard. But if we commit to it and we do it on a regular basis, I believe we are building this generation of thinkers that's going to be critically important for their success. So the three strategies I want to look at quickly together around comprehension, one's called question generator, the other is what if, and then your turn, my turn. So the question generator is really not so much a strategy as a, if you will, a way of teaching. And that's doing what I just shared, that modeling, teaching, and giving time for students to come up with their own questions. And as I said, this isn't always easy, but if you can give it a whirl, and maybe some of you have had success with it, it can really, I've seen it in my own teaching, that it really challenges students to look at the text they're reading in a new way. So the way to model that is as you do work together in the classroom, that you ask those questions, that you challenge students to think, well, what if this happened? Or what if this ending came, or et cetera. So the first piece of it is to model, then of course to show students how this works and give them the time as they work through any of the texts that you're working on to actually do and work with these generated questions. Second strategy is called what if, and that's the very simple strategy that changes the ending or direction of a story or the text that they're reading. So it challenges students to ask what if as they read, as they watch, as they listen to English language, and gets them thinking about potential alternatives or potential changes in the actual text that they're looking at. So this builds a capacity for discussion on alternatives, new ideas, other possibilities. And again, this works towards that open-mindedness, trying to give students examples of new ways of thinking. And the what if can kind of do that in a way that helps to kind of open that imagination for students. So I want you to just think for a minute about a good way to use this strategy in your own teaching. And I'll ask Trisha to come back if anybody has any ideas or if they've had any experience with a strategy like this as they've used this example in your own classroom or in your own setting.
Well, right now we don't have anything, but I do have an example. It was a number of years ago. I was teaching in a secondary classroom, and we were reading a I guess you would say a short story, and it was on a trial. And so that's basically what I did is I said, well, what if the outcome of the trial changed this way? Or what if we did that? And then what they needed to do is that then they actually, the whole point of the activity is that they would then make arguments in favor or against. But by promoting that, and me, like you said, the modeling, they were able to kind of think of alternatives to help their case that they had going on. And then they were able to practice that. Yeah,
that's great. And that was a nonfiction piece, right?
Yes,
it was a real trial that happened.
Yes.
So Trish just gave an example of how it can certainly work with nonfiction text. It also is, and some would argue it's even easier with fiction if it's a story that's being read, because then you can, really build students or allow students' imagination to go, what if a different ending, etc.
Okay, so I think most people are just thinking in their minds about their teaching examples because they're not sharing it with us, which is fine. Oh, wait, there is one. Kit wants to say I sometimes show the pictures to my students and let them take some minutes to make up a story. Then they tell the class.
That is exactly, that's like another way into this same way of thinking. So it's, and that's a pretty that's a really good example, that idea of using visuals only. And then the students have to come up either with the adjectives, with the descriptors, with the verbs, etc., to build a story around the pictures. So that's a great example. It's a little different from this, but it's basically the same idea as the what if.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Maribel also said that they'll read a short story and then she'll do this very thing. She'll ask after reading the short story, what would happen if you did this, that, or the other, to think about that.
Okay, great. And then the last of these three little strategies is something we call your turn, my turn, which basically encourages students to work together to ask each other questions about the particular passage or the text or whatever. And this Vicky Urquhart quote is very powerful for me, because I think that she says that when students do this, they grow more aware of their processes, strengthen their abilities to select and use strategies, and also builds their critical thinking skills. So Trisha just went away, but I need her back, because I just want to give you a little bit of an example of this one. So let's say here's a small bit of text, descriptive text, nonfiction, obviously text, about Chiang Rai, right? So let's imagine this is a bit of text that you're working with. Trisha and I are, of course, two of your star pupils. And we're going to look at this, and we're going to try to do a your turn, my turn. So Trisha, since you're both lovelier and younger than I am, yes, how about you go first?
I would love to go first. Thank you. So as I'm just wondering, Kevin, so it talks about in here that they have like agricultural products, pineapples, tea, and they say that they're from Royal Projects. I am wondering what they do with these. Are they for export? Are they for their own use? What do they do with these products that they have?
Yeah. Now, of course, I don't have the answer, and the other student is not going to necessarily have the answer for that, but that's okay. The answer doesn't matter. That's a really good question that this text brought up in your mind and that you wanted to know about. So my turn, maybe after having that conversation, yes, there's probably tourism, or maybe with Royal Projects. I mean, we all know the real story here. The Royal Projects were to help them get out of the opium work. And some of the kids may know that, but I mean, it's really an amazing success story. When you look at Doi Tang and you look at what's gone on in those communities in Chiang Rai, it's been quite amazing. But a question I might have, when it's my turn, is it says, as well as carved wood products. Okay, so it doesn't tell me this in the text, but I've never been to Chiang Rai, let's say. Am I safe to assume from this that there's forests? Trish, what do you think?
Well, I would think that there must be some sort of forest, which then makes me say, what kind of trees are they using? I mean, I know that in Thailand they have, teak, but would that be what they were using? Isn't teak pretty hard and also endangered, I guess is the word I would use, so that they're, right, they're not supposed to make things out of teak, but at the same time, what kind of wood would it be? That's what it prompts me to then ask you if we were having this discussion.
Right. So basically, I mean, we've got a piece of text and we are allowing students, and some of this text, what Trisha and I didn't do, but which is also an excellent opportunity in these kind of strategies, we didn't necessarily personalize it. Okay. So, but I could have said, 2 weeks ago, I was in Chiang Rai, and this is what I saw, and it was very beautiful. And I could have told my whole story about the trip we just did to Chiang Rai. The whole idea, again, this isn't about right answer, wrong answer. It's about giving students the time and space to develop those questioning skills, to talk to each other, to build that oral language capacity, and all the while, hopefully, building or deepening their comprehension of the text.
Kevin, can I just make one quick little comment here? I was really struck by something that you said earlier in the presentation about that it's something that needs to be taught. But I think sometimes, like, there's a lot of university affiliated people in this webinar, but even I was working with a 7-year-old a couple of weeks ago, and many of these skills were things that are taught in her school. And so as I was working with her, she was able to do them. And so I think that it is something that, is available to all levels from the university. It's just that their questions change, and it's not limited. So if you are a primary teacher out there and you think that, that's just for the university teachers out there or instructors, or you're secondary and you think, that's just, I can't do this, that it is for all. It's something that can be taught and should be taught all along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because that's I tried to say that at the beginning, but that is certainly a critically important element, that no matter the level of the child, I mean, and, a 7-year-old is not going to be asking, advanced, biochemical based questions, but a university level person may know more, a student may know more, but they still, from 7 to 17 to 70, we all have this capacity. And building our capacity in this kind of thinking is certainly a benefit to every student at every level. Okay, I wanted to share this list of questions with you. Now, Trish, did we figure out how we're going to do this?
Yes, we have this. Kevin has given me this, and RELO Bangkok will put it up on their Facebook page. So you can check out the Facebook page. This document will be up there. And you can, then it'll be in a PDF format. You can download it and you can have this.
So this is from Doug Fisher and Nancy Frey in San Diego, California. But these are really good, solid prompts that, again, hit each of the levels. And it's in reverse order here, but these are the Bloom's taxonomy levels, right? You see remember down here in the purple, all the way going up to create in the orange. It starts with remembering at the top and goes down to create at the bottom. But these are the kinds of questions that when we help them to generate questions, when we present prompts to them for this kind of discussion, this is really an excellent list for you to use. So I'm gonna close out with this quote from Hitchens that I like very much, that says, "The essence of the independent mind lies not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks." And that's truly, I think, what's important. The content is critically important for all of us as teachers, but helping students frame the way they're learning and the way they're questioning and the way they're thinking is also a critically important element. So I just want to share with you some of the references I used. Most of these are very US based, and you may or may not be familiar with them. The top 3 are professional organizations. The bottom 3 are actually very hands-on teacher kind of strategy-based websites. So that's Keys to Literacy, Fisher and Frey, and Shanahan on Literacy. So these are folks who've done a lot of work around reading instruction in the US, and they have just a lot of great ideas. As I said, the top 3, the ASCD is the Supervision and Curriculum Organization, the International Literacy Association, and the National Council of Teachers of English. So all these references, have good resources for you to use and kind of also believe in this whole idea of promoting critical thinking. There's also a really interesting research piece that's more local, Indonesia. It's a Southeast Asian scholar, Haritz Mastuki. And he wrote this piece about making meaning in English learning teaching, and focused it on, in a description of utilizing critical thinking skills and that meaning making. That's from the Teflon Journal back in 2011. But it's an interesting article, and if anybody's really interested in this and kind of wants to take it from a more regional spin, this colleague's work is worth taking a look at. So I'm gonna leave you here with a big thank you. This has been a great opportunity for me to share some ideas. I'm grateful for your time that you've given me. It's the greatest commodity in the modern world. So I'm grateful for the time, and I hope that there was something in everybody's head somewhere that clicked, and that you learned something, and it was worth the 55 minutes that we've spent together. I'll ask for some questions or comments, but I'll also throw it back to Trish because she had this that she wanted to talk about as well.
Okay, so we haven't had any questions come up that haven't been dealt with along the way. So I want to announce, as we're closing up here, that we have another one coming up, and we're hoping that this will work. We're still in the testing phases because of technology issues, but we're going to be talking about Google Docs and how you can do collaborative writing. And it's real exciting. I'm working on this with Amy, and it should be really exciting. So we hope to see you there. It's on April 2nd. That's the correct day. So April 2nd, not too far away. So we hope you can all make it. And we are very thankful to, we how do I say this? We're very grateful that Kevin Colleary, Dr. Kevin Colleary, of course, was able to share with us these great ideas and some practical ways to do it. We hope to see you here next time. Like I said, have a great evening. We're signing off now. Bye, Kevin. Bye, everybody.
Bye.